Good Monday, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Mondays with Manny. It is June 15th, I think. No, it's not. It's June 22nd. I don't know what day it is. It's June 22nd, and I am your host, Manny Rodriguez, and this is a live cast. We do have a live audience. You can see their faces, some of them on the video here. We are recording, and for those that are watching the recording, thank you very much for spending the time with us this morning, or this afternoon, whatever time it is that you're watching. Special thanks to Business Science Magazine, 305 Publishing, and the OBM Alliance, and of course my teammates at Bueno Ventures. Today, we have a special guest, Leah Fenema Hall, a behavior analyst practicing her great work of OBM, Organizational Behavior Management, out in the United Kingdom. And I will do her no justice, really, to introduce her because she has a fantastic background and experience, and the work that she's doing today is superb. So I'm going to go ahead and put Leah on the spot. So thank you. Welcome to Mondays with Manny. Good Monday to you.
Thank you.
So go ahead, if you would, just give us kind of an idea, a synopsis of, your background, your experience, and the work that you're doing today.
Right. Well, I guess the elevator pitch is, yes, I'm a behavior analyst by training. At the moment, I am one of the two directors of Lux Consulting out in the UK, and we help organizations achieve their goals through their people. Whether that means changing the systems in the organization to motivate people to do what they need to do to achieve those goals, or whether it's performance management more directly.
So tell us a little bit about, so you're working in the United Kingdom, you're a behavior analyst, you were in the United States, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit more, and I'm going to say, that's kind of a unique experience all in of itself, the practice of our field, of our science in two different countries, and two different sets of consumer bases as well. So could you give us kind of a sense of what that's been like for you as one professional to another?
Well, funny you mentioned that because I'm a little bit prepared because I just did a video interview for Appalachian State, App State, a week or so ago on that very topic. So,
cool.
Yeah. So the cultural differences between the UK and the US from a business perspective, or actually just I guess a business perspective is the same as a personal perspective, but no, there's a lot of differences, and I won't bother going into all of them. But some of the big ones are we may speak technically the same language, but we really don't. American culture is vastly different than the culture in the UK, and we also do a lot of work in the rest of the world. So everywhere that you do this work, the rules are vastly different. The human behavior principles are the same, but the way that they look is not. So yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that I had to get over in the UK is the speed of work. So in the US, we value how much time you put in, and we do things pretty quickly. So you sit down for a 10 o'clock meeting, and you might have a deal at 12, and you're ready to go the next Monday. Not so in the UK. In the UK, it's more of a courting process. It could be months that something exists in your sort of sales pipeline, and that's reflected also in we're a little bit less concerned over here how many hours you put in. Nobody's going to judge you if you're sort of just in the office from 9 to 5. That's perfectly acceptable. You don't get any extra points for being first in, last out.
So we're going to talk a lot about culture, organizational culture, and how we as, behavior specialists and scientists and just good old-fashioned business consultants, how we tackle these challenges. And so, one of the things that Leah and I did before today was we kind of talked about that. We were just kind of sharing stories and different examples of those kind of things. So I would love to kind of weave in what you told them in Appalachian State and try to weave some of that in too, because I didn't even know that when we were prepping for this. So maybe we can weave some of that in. So the interesting part of our audience here, Leah, is it's a kind of a mix. We have some folks in the education industry, right? That's Annie. Annie's in the education industry. And then we have behavior analysts, and then we have some HR professionals who watch us a lot, and then we have some business folks. So kind of a nice little mixed bag, of professionals out there doing some good stuff. Um, and I thought our topic today was going to be just hit home for a lot of people in a lot of different ways, even if we talk about one or two different industries. And the topic of today that we decided to tackle was organizational culture and this big old ambiguous word called trust, and how they kind of meld together. So let's go ahead and just kind of start big, right? Let's start at like a foundation setting kind of thing. And let's define organizational culture and how trust fits in. And so, Leah, we let's Leah's got a nice way of kind of wrapping this up together. So Leah, tell the audience what's your definition.
Right. Well, I think your organizational culture, there's no sort of right and wrong or good and bad with culture. It's really just what it is that you see people doing in your organization and the way that you see them doing it. So whether, it's literally the things that you can see them doing and the way that you can see them doing it. It's also the way that they think about it, the way they feel about it. And a lot of times that comes out observably in narratives. So what are the stories that people tell themselves and the stories that you tell each other in your organization? So yeah, it's very much the way we do things around here. But the way that comes out can be in a lot of different ways.
So give us some examples. Like, let me give a scenario, and I got to pick on the airline industry because you work with the airline industry. So there's a whole lot of behavior going on in the airline industry. If you like me, you fly a lot and you go into airports and you see a whole lot of activity, but Leah also gets to see the activity behind the scenes, right? So what is the way, how would you describe, if somebody were to say, okay, Leah, you work in the airline industry. What is the way they do, how is the way they do things around there? What is their culture? How would you paint that picture?
Wow, that's a good question. So aviation is an enormous industry. So under the umbrella of aviation, not that I can even attempt to list everything that exists under there, but yeah, you've got airlines, you've got airports, you've got the people that manufacture the bits and bobs that go on the aircraft, and everything else in between. So you can't really say that there's any particular culture that's in the aviation industry. Everyone's got their own special flavor. But one thing that's, if you're gonna pick on airlines, I would say something that you can't quite avoid is turnaround pressure. So if you're an airline, you need your aircraft to get in and out of an airport as quickly as humanly possible, because you're literally losing millions if you don't. So there's a massive time pressure. So if we're talking about the way we do things, you'll see management putting a lot of pressure on time. You'll see employees a lot more likely to be motivated to cut corners and to do things quickly instead of doing things necessarily correctly, or safely, especially.
Yeah, and so safety in the airline industry is obviously it's a huge deal, not just for the employees, of course, but also for the consumers. And one of the things we talked about as far as like, when it comes to culture and when it comes to our sciences, we are typically asked to come and analyze culture, right? And which is always kind of an interesting thing. Hey, we want to we want to change our culture. We want to make a better culture. Can you come and analyze our culture? And it's kind of like a head scratcher at first for some people, because what does that mean, right? What does that look like? We of course know it's about looking at behavior. So, but I wanted to paint a couple scenarios and see, what would Leah do, right? So here's a couple, like a scenario I was thinking about. So if you think about like an executive, right? And in the airline industry, of course, year over year, there's lots of change that happens in the airline industry. Some of it is influenced by the Fed, the federal government. Some of it's influenced by society at large. Some of it's influenced by, you know, major disasters or something. But no matter what, there's been a lot of change in the airline industry over the years. Some change is good. Some change is kind of like we're not sure what's driving this change. And for the employees of any company, including the airline industry, they probably wonder why are they doing this kind of change. And so the scenario I wanted to paint for the audience here is, let's say an executive brings you in as a consultant and says, "I want to change our culture, and I want it this way, and I want it this way, and I want it that way, and I don't care if the employees want it or not." So that's quite a dynamic there. That's quite a scenario. What's your approach in that kind of scenario?
Yeah, that's fine. You know, if you're sort of the CEO, you can have whatever culture you like, but it's really not about the kind of culture that you want. It's really more about what is the culture that you have right now, and what are your goals as an organization. So it may be the case that the culture you have in your organization at this very moment is perfectly orchestrated to support your organizational goals. It's usually not. It's more often the case, and we say this a lot, if you don't sort of intentionally design your culture as an organization, the universe is really happy to do it for you, but you have no idea sort of what the universe wants for your organization. It's not likely to be what you're going for. So if the question is about whether the executive has a different idea of what he or she would like to see in the culture than your staff, you might dig a little bit more into what it is they want and why it is they want it, which you go in, you know, that devolves into several more specific questions. It's, okay, well, what exactly would that look like? What are people going to be doing? What are they going to be doing differently than they are today? And what you'll find is usually what we tend to do is have a really specific idea of how we want things done, not because we want it done that way, but because in our head we're really sure that if we would just do it that way, we'll get this particular outcome that we're looking for. So the first step is really figuring out what exactly is the outcome that you're trying to achieve. So then the conversation becomes about, is your culture right now achieving that outcome? Is it likely to achieve that outcome, or have you gone a bit off track? And if you've gone off track, what track are you on? And where does it go? And is that where you want to go? And if not, we need to figure out what behavior needs to look like so that you're back on track. And if that's different from what your employees want, there's a really good chance they're telling you something you probably don't want to hear.
And so in that spirit, and I'm putting myself on and off mute because there's a little background noise, so I don't want to break the filming. So you know, when it comes to that that mode of like things they don't want to have, they don't want to hear, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to paint like this scenario of in my head. So let's say you have to tell them the bad news, right? But they still are insistent they want this culture change. But the news that you have to tell them doesn't match what they want, right? And so now you got to give them the bad news. You got to tell them the stuff they don't want to hear. So how do you and I guess in a word, massage the feedback in a way that from a practitioner of behavioral science, a consultant in the world of business, and this is a person that wants to be your client and wants you to help them,
Yeah.
they may just be stuck in their ways. So how do you massage it so that at the end result, they feel like they're going in the right direction, but maybe they swallowed a bit of humble pie, to say that,
Yeah.
say, right?
Well, wow, that really gets into some interpersonal skills. And I've got to say, if you're going to consult for any human ever in any capacity, you need to really brush up on your interpersonal skills, because telling people things that they don't want to hear is never easy. What, from the angle of the consultant, I can tell you, having a background as a scientist, and my business partner does as well, uh, it's really a hill to climb mentally and emotionally, where you realize that actually this person that has pulled you into their organization, um, their perception of reality and your perception of reality are going to be two totally different things. And as scientists, we don't like that. We're not comfortable with that. We like things to be, look, if it is, it's round, it's pink, it's got polka dots, we need them to say it's round, it's pink, it's got polka dots. But actually, if they're staring at the same object and saying it's triangular and it's purple and it's got squares, that's fine. That's completely fine. You are not helping anyone to sit there and convince them that your analysis of the situation, they need to understand it. They really don't need to understand it. It's not their job. What you do need to clarify is their values. You need to clarify what they actually want things to look like in the end. And a more specific example is we often get pulled in to do training. Yeah. If you do this training, I'm convinced you will solve my problems. When we first started, we foolishly, we used to say, oh, no, that won't solve your problems. Let me tell you more about your problems. Your problems are really this. And, training won't even touch them. Luckily, we've now evolved as humans. We now realize that, do you know what? If you want me to go in and do training, that's completely fine. I'm still going to make sure I understand what you want. I'm still going to make sure that I understand where you're coming from. And what I will say is, okay, I'm going to do this training. Here's what I'm going to include in it. Here is the outcome that you can expect as a result of training. Is that something you like? Yes or no? And if they're still wanting just training, that's fine. I can do a lot of good, even though I know I'm not, this is going to sound really wrong, but I'm not getting the whole problem right then and there. Sometimes it takes people a little bit of time to get more comfortable with the idea that you even do understand their problem. And one way to convince them that you absolutely don't understand their problem is to argue over the analysis and try to convince them that, something that some consultants, I don't know that I've ever met any, I'm the smartest person in the room and I really understand your problems better than you do. Maybe you do, but that's an argument you never win.
So Leah, let's now tie in the whole like trust thing, because it seems like, okay, so in these scenarios we're painting, like how does one build trust in that kind of environment, especially if you're the boss and the executive, right? Trust is a big deal. Trust is a major factor in organizations. We also know there's data out there that says people leave because they don't trust their employers, they don't trust their executives, so
Yeah.
so what's your take on trust, and how do you tackle that from a behavioral science perspective? Like, and then I have a couple scenarios I'm going to throw at you to really kind of dig into those. But in general, like, do you have a general thought
Oh,
on the
sorry.
whole?
Are you still there, Manny? You cut
I'm
out
here.
after what's your take on trust? Okay,
Yeah, I'm
sorry.
here. No, I'm here. I think there's that delay again.
Something else we're famous for in the UK is really slow broadband speeds.
Yeah, so for the audience, when Lee and I did this before, we had the same thing go on last time, and it was just one-on-one. And so here we are in a group. I'm not sure. Maybe the UK is looking to ban Zoom, and we'll have to go to a different platform. I don't know.
Do you know what? It's a long story that we don't necessarily have any reason to get into, but it's definitely old infrastructure. So there you go. That's the explanation. Anyway,
Exactly.
so about trust.
Yeah.
Trust is multifaceted. It is not one particular thing. It's difficult to even define. If you really want to oversimplify it, then trust is, does reality match expectations in your presence? Yeah, so if it does, generally people will trust you more. So if you've set somebody up to have really realistic expectations, so you're like, look, when you walk down the street, I don't know, this green light will turn on. And then sure enough, you walk down the street and the green light turns on. Okay, great. I trust you. Yeah, I'm going to begin to believe you because what you said, the expectation you set for me has manifested itself in reality, as far as I'm concerned. And so that's trust. But it's not really that simple. There's really so much else going on. Everybody brings something different to the organization. There's a big part of this that's what they're expecting given what they've had in the past. A lot of people really struggle to trust their leadership because very often, given the fact that leaders are humans, in their personal past, there's going to be a long history of people in leadership positions behaving in a way that's untrustworthy. So promising things that they didn't end up delivering, or appearing to behave in a way that was underhanded or subversive or didn't have somebody's best interest in mind. So I think that's another good element in trust is people need to feel that you have their best interest in mind. But again, these are all inferences we make as a result of the things that we see and the things that we do and the things that other people do around us. So it's the same in an organization.
All right, Leah. So let me break down a couple of scenarios. So Leah and I like to do the scenario game. It's almost like the what if game. So we'll probably end with these two scenarios, okay? And because it's already close to 9:30 my time a.m. And usually Mondays with me we try to do like 20-30 minutes. But so I want to throw a couple of scenarios, and then we'll stop the recording and let the folks that are here, do some Q&A. So Leah is a behavior analyst. That's her specialty. That's her background. And so the scenario I have is, okay, you have a manager, and you have that manager's team, right? A group of employees, and the group of employees, your job is to get feedback from the employees on the state of the culture, right? And all things point to one thing alone, and that is that none of the employees trust that manager. So they like the company overall. They love the benefits. They love all the stuff that people think that they are not going to like. They like their time off. They like their PTO. They even like the customers. But the manager they work for, they just simply don't trust what that manager has to say or what that manager, their intentions, right? So as a behavior analyst, like that word trust comes up and it comes up and it comes up, and maybe you get a few examples here and there, but it's really broad, right? So as a behavior analyst, like describe how you would tackle that scenario, and your client is the manager. Did I lose you? Okay, there you are.
Just for a second, I lost you. So you said as a behavior analyst.
As a behavior analyst, how would you tackle that knowing that your client is actually the manager?
Yeah. Isn't it the worst when your client's the problem? Okay, I think by definition, for the most part, we always like to say that stuff rolls uphill in organizations. So any issue that you have it's going to be the responsibility of your senior leadership to fix, whether or not it came from them. But when you have a group of people that are all telling the same story, right? So their narrative is matching. They're all in agreement. We don't trust this person. You're going to want to dig into why. Why would they say that? And mind you, it doesn't, who knows? You've got to do a lot of digging to figure out why it is they're saying that they don't trust that person. And there are so many possibilities, but you really need to dig into, okay, I hear you saying you don't trust them. You all seem to be agreeing on the fact that you don't trust this person. What makes you say that? What's happened in the past? Could you walk me through what that looked like? And what you'll probably find is there are some common themes that have resulted in people saying they don't trust that person. It might be, don't forget that leaders are humans, so they do foolish things all the time without meaning to do them. It could be the case that they don't want to tell people things that they know will upset them. So they might accidentally be setting up unrealistic expectations. Always assume that this is an innocent problem. The chances that it's like a really nefarious, boss out to get you are small. It's usually your boss just has no idea that actually it would be better if you just said, you know what, here's what I can promise you. It's this big, it's very small. Here are all the things I can't promise you. That's an enormous list. And just being very clear about when things change. So, I promised you this, but actually here are the things that have happened. And I'm so sorry that can't possibly happen now because of these reasons. But you've got to keep the communication open. It's got to be as transparent as possible. When people start to see, when they feel misled, when they see things not matching what they expected, then they're going to start to make these, really unfair associations. They're going to start to call the leader, oh, they're a bad person, or they're a liar, they're manipulative. Well, maybe, or maybe they just didn't want to tell you something that they thought you might not like. Or maybe they got really excited about a certain project going a certain way, and then it blew up, and they didn't really want to turn around and say, do you know what, it blew up. All that stuff I told you is never going to happen. Yeah, so it's a tough situation, but you need to figure out why have they said that and really address that head on with the leader. Look, the narrative is that you're not trustworthy. Here's what they're saying, and here's what we need to do if you want them to stop saying that.
All right, that's brilliant. Those are I was typing some of those notes, and so it's so as you can as a behavior analyst, more often than not, we try to like really hone in on what's objective, what's observable, what are we trying to really hone in on, right? So okay, let me throw scenario number 2. All right, here's scenario number 2. So different manager, different team, same situation. It's a lack of trust. However, in this scenario, the manager has received that feedback more than once, and more than one team, in fact. And this manager was moved from one team to another team to another team, and yet the trust equation keeps coming up. So now, as a behavior analyst as well as a business consultant, now we got 2 hats on, because behavior analysts we don't really have that regimen, that training on how to deal with that kind of thing, but the business world does, and so we have to kind of marry the 2. So paint that picture. And by the way, our free version of Zoom is going to end in about 9 minutes and 27 seconds. So we're going to make sure we hit the scenario.
Make sure that it's less than 9 minutes. Okay. I'll try to make it even less.
All right. Good going.
Right. Where you've got, and we see this all the time, and it blows my mind every time. You have a bad match with a leader in a team, and you think if you just move them to another team, then the exact same problems aren't going to happen. But we know that's highly unlikely, highly unlikely. And in the situation you just painted, it sounds like the person in the management position is not at the top of that organization. If they're being moved from team to team, then they're being managed by somebody. So what I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt is who is managing the manager, because that person has some difficult questions to answer, because the manager's behavior hasn't improved despite getting a fresh start in another team. So if that manager is just not aware of what's happening and hasn't got actually adequate feedback to change their performance, then either A, they haven't been managed and that's the malfunction, or B, and you know what, sometimes this is just the answer, maybe this isn't the best position for them. Maybe they're not somebody who loves managing people. Maybe they're not somebody who's happy in their job. Either way, it's not working. So it's the responsibility of that manager's leader or manager to sort it out. And if it doesn't get sorted out, you can't just keep moving something around in your organization. That's not working. Sometimes they're just going to be happier somewhere else. That's a totally acceptable answer.
All right, brilliant. I love it. And I think you answered it superbly. So I'm not even going to add to that, because I've been in those same scenarios myself. And typically that's kind of the answer. It's like, well, maybe this is just not a good fit. Maybe this is not, you're just simply not what they say, managerial material, right? Managerial material. So excellent. Well, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to end the recording with Mondays with Manny on that one. And we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A or comments with our with our folks here that have joined us live. Leah Fenimahal, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.